And we're back with another episode of the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. Thanks so much for watching and listening. It's Gerald Glassford. Appreciate everybody out there again watching and listening to everything that we do here. If you have any questions, always for us, Lakers Fast Break, wherever you get your social media, or LakersFastBreak at yahoo.com. And please like and subscribe today, right there for you at the Lakers Fast Break. Well, with some time to reflect on what the Lakers have done so far this season and what's up ahead, everything that went on in the trade deadline, and what is the outcome for ultimately for the Lakers this season. There's no better man that I talk to than a devoted Lakers fan indeed. Plus, with the summer coming around and the Lakers actually still having a draft choice, although that's pretty much in question where it's at. But I'm thinking it's going to be around the late teens ish, 15 to 20, somewhere around there after they do the swap between them and New Orleans. There's no better person to ask than my good friend indeed. You got to go ahead and check out. He is part of the triumvirate of great NBA draft folks that are there for you right now. Each and every episode, you got to go ahead and talk to the guys today at the Upside Swings podcast. That's right, the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. Go ahead and check out what Bryce, Cooper, and my guest today, Stone Hansen, are going to go ahead and do for you each and every time out. They just went ahead and scouted the G League Ignite, a team that I know all too well. In fact, I'm actually down the road from them right now. So they've got some great thoughts on that, plus everything going on with the NBA draft. It is Stone Hansen. Stone, thanks for returning, my friend. Great to have you here. Looking forward to a great conversation on today's show about the Lakers and the NBA draft.
Yeah, good to be back. It's been a while, and I'm excited to talk Lakers because I don't get to do it a ton on my own pod. So it's fun to come here and talk about it.
They say, "Oh God, Lakers again! Oh, Lakers
Yeah,
again! Oh,
they
Lakers,
shut me out.
Lakers." Yeah, I hear you, my friend. I hear you. It's either it seems like a lot, oftentimes it's like the Lakers fans and everybody else, as far as like us versus them. Sometimes, with
Yeah.
our fandom. So, I will say though that the Lakers, the people that are not Lakers fans, actually can go ahead and giving us fair game as far as teasing is concerned, because the Lakers have absolutely stunk for the first 50 some odd games this season. And coming out of the All-Star break, the mission is clear. With just 23 games left coming out of the All-Star break, the Lakers have to get into high gear. I'm not sure if they will. We'll see, but they did make an effort. Rob Pelinka, the GM of the Lakers, did make his moves as far as some trades before the trade deadline in what he calls his pre-agency, per se, as far as decisions that he can make on keeping the roster the way it is or actually tearing it down during the summer and building something else. Your thoughts on the moves made at the trade deadline? Do you think it'll actually build the team into a better situation this year, or do you think it's meant for the seasons to come?
I think both. Actually, I think that it helps us both short term and long term.
Mhm.
I think that if you have a team that has the players like LeBron James and AD that are having the seasons that they're having, you sort of want to compete this year. You don't, I don't think, want to waste those, and you want to try and go as all in as you can with the assets that you had. And I think Pelinka made probably as good a move as you could have hoped for as a Laker fan with what he had to get himself out of the hole that he dug himself in with the Westbrook trade, and got a decent return. I think getting three guys that will instantly be in your rotation. We can argue whether they should be starting or not. That's another conversation. But the three guys, that I think are really valuable to the Lakers specifically and how they fit around LeBron and AD much better than Westbrook, who we shipped out.
Well, see, that leaves you with a situation like I've said before. It's addition by subtraction, where you had so many distractions with Russell Westbrook and how that trade went awry rather quickly, and the fit it went around the Lakers was just it just wasn't there. And with Patrick Beverly, his very nature, if he was no longer able to produce consistently on the court, both on the offensive and surprisingly the defensive end, because he was getting repeatedly torched. These 6'1" wings, as he often called himself, and obviously what Rob Pelinka called him, just didn't work. So the distractions aside, I'm glad they got rid of him, and it is addition by subtraction. But the guys we got in place, the Vanderbilts, the Mo Bambas, the D'Angelo Russells, the Malik Beasley's, the Rui Hashimura's. These aren't household names by any stretch of the imagination. And they're guys that I don't think any one of them have an all-star game in mind coming up anytime in the near future. I know D'Angelo did make the all-star, but okay, that's the one and done deal for him. But these guys, they fit better around LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And I think it's a step in the right direction. But do you think it's a big enough step for them to get back into the play-in mix?
I do. When you look at what's sort of happening around the rest of the league and who's ahead of the Lakers,
Mhm.
the Blazers, I don't think did much to improve. They made a couple minor moves at the deadline, but I don't think they've done enough to really bump themselves up a whole lot. They should be someone that we are able to jump above. Obviously, the Thunder, I don't think are trying to win; they're unintentionally winning. So you might expect some
Don't tell that
shutdowns.
to Shay.
Yeah, you might expect some shutdowns heading into the final, stretch here of games. The Jazz obviously got worse by us getting, three or two of their key players in their rotation. The Warriors have Steph now out for an extended period of time, and the Pelicans now have Zion out for an extended period of time. And we have no clue when Karl Anthony Towns is coming back for the Timberwolves. So that right there is like a good six or so teams that are now not necessarily the Lakers are definitively better, but they're now in the mix with those teams. They're not definitively worse like we were.
Mhm.
So if we can catch up to a few of those, I mean, that's enough to get us into the play-in. Obviously, as a Laker fan, you'd want them to jump all six of them, which is probably not super likely. But you only need three. If you could jump three of them, then you're in that play-in, and I think that's doable for the remaining stretch for the Lakers.
And that's something I guess that a lot of people are hoping to cling on, because when you're 5, 6 games out of 500, I think the first goal is to get to 500 as fast as you can, as soon as possible. Something the Lakers have not been able to do all season since they were 0-0. And always trying to look up and always trying to claw your way up, it means that for every step you're taking forward, you're taking 2 steps backward. And I think that's the way the season has gone and the way the season went, whether it's injuries or just poor decision making. Your thoughts, though, I think with LeBron and AD, their health is should be of great concern. Do you see them making it all the way through the rest of the season? Because if you've been on the show, you know that I've with LeBron James, I have a healthy respect for as a basketball player on the court, but him not playing these past few games heading into the break, the New Orleans game notwithstanding, but the games that they could have really made a jump on, and he wasn't there, and then all of a sudden you see him in Phoenix at the Super Bowl. I mean, it's not a great look, but I think there's something wrong with his foot to the point where he is keeping him out of the lineup, in and out of the lineup time after time. I'm concerned with him and AD, which we've heard has extensive, injury issues and concerns along with his foot as well.
Yeah, I think with LeBron in the past, obviously, there's been a lot of times where they his teams play really well. They get into the playoffs, and he likes to take a little bit of time off before he gets into the playoffs, and so he keeps himself fresh. I'm wondering if that's obviously this toe thing has sort of been a factor for him throughout times this season, off and on. But I'm wondering if that's a part of it where he wants to really focus on the back end after the All Star break and do a really risky move of just trying to push through those last final games to get in and take this little time off to rest and recover and recover through All Star break. Maybe that's a factor of it, but it's hard to really say without inside knowledge, but I do think that AD and LeBron, like there's no way we make the play in without them, especially LeBron. on the team in this final push.
I mean, we got 23 games left coming out of the
Yeah.
All-Star break. They've got to be healthy for at least 20 to 21 of them as a combined unit. Otherwise, it's going to be a very tough hill to climb.
Yeah, definitely. I think without AD, it's still somewhat doable if LeBron plays all the games.
Mhm.
It's definitely harder, but I think it's still not out of the question. I think with LeBron out of those 20 games or so, it's out of the question. I don't think we can make the play in if LeBron doesn't play those 20 or so games.
And that to be would be very disappointing because the fact that this Rob has finally tried to start thinking in I guess a better fashion as far as how to fit pieces around LeBron. He was trying to do the opposite, where everybody would go one way as far as how they would fit a team around the LeBron. Shooters, good defenders. He would go in an opposite direction. And now finally, he's starting to realize I need to go ahead and put shooters once again and good defenders once again. It worked in 2020 when they had guys that were good enough behind the 3-point area and then also as well could definitely defend. Finally, we're starting to see a little bit of that, although Russell is not the greatest defender in the world. Beasley's not the greatest defender in the world, but these guys can go ahead and shoot. So it's at least from there, it should be able to stretch the floor and at least give some better looks for both LeBron and AD.
Yeah, for sure. Those two guys. Then he wasn't exactly at the deadline, but Hachimura, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but I do think just having someone that can be in your rotation rather than none who wasn't even really playing during his tenure as a Laker definitely helps them and puts them in the right direction. Uh, I- it's I think it's important for us in the sense that for us to compete and it puts us further. I don't think it's enough for us to go all the way. Um, so that makes me even more excited more about the long-term ramifications of this trade because I think that when you're looking at the big picture, that's what this trade even affects more so rather than just the short term. But it is important for the short term because it shows LeBron, obviously, and AD that Pelinka is committed to trying to start making the right decisions and giving us a competent team to put out on the floor night in and night out.
And essentially, what the Russell Westbrook trade did for us, as far as from a asset standpoint, it gives the Lakers some leeway as far as decision making. Bringing in, I think you can essentially say four different players for Russell Westbrook in Bamba, Vanderbilt. Of course, you talk about Russell and Beasley. All four of those guys, they essentially probably would not be on the team unless you traded away Russell Westbrook. And so Russell Westbrook, his contract of $47 million has been translated into four rotational players, which is what you wanted to go ahead and do. The thing is, though, can these guys go ahead and gel fast enough and soon enough in order to go ahead and do that? We'll still look upon the Russell Westbrook trade as probably one of the worst trades in Los Angeles Lakers history. I mean, the fact is that we're still burnt two first round picks we'll never get back because one that we two that we lost or one that we lost initially when we traded for him and one that we lost upon trading him out just to get rid of the contract. I think that's something that bears in mind and will probably be something that'll be attached to Rob Pelinka going forward. But be that as it may, at the end of the season, do you think Rob Pelinka should still be in charge of running the front office? That's another big question I wanted to ask you because there's some more decisions that have to be made during the summer, including a draft pick for the Lakers.
Yeah. I mean, what Pelinka did at the deadline was really good, but the the fact of the matter is when you look at the big picture, he's the one that put us in the hole and he was the one that had to do his best to get us out of it. I don't think what he did was redeemable enough to make up for the rest of the resume in terms of the bad decisions made. That said, it's difficult now because obviously he just got an extension. So foreseeing him to not be there for the foreseeable future is tough because I think Genie now trusts him, and especially after how much praise they've gotten from this trade, um, I think that they may now think um, it's smooth sailing, and they're starting to see the vision and get the right moves down. So um, I don't foresee it happening, but if it were up to me, I don't think Pelinka would be here after this season ends.
I agree with you, but I still want to see how the season ends before you finally make that call 100%. And I've been trying to correlate that to the audience. I mean, there's a segment of the audience that still cannot stand Rob Pelinka, and there's now a growing sentiment that, oh, Rob's the greatest coming out of that trade. And I'm like saying to them, guys and gals out there, our audience, please, if a student for the first 2 years of their college or their high school or wherever that they're getting F's and D's, then all of a sudden they get B pluses and A's for one series, maybe a couple periods here and there, or a couple tests. That doesn't necessarily make them a good student. That just means they're maybe headed in the right direction. But the thing is, with a franchise that needs to get in gear right away, with a LeBron now approaching 39 years old this year, your time is running out. I mean, Bob Myers may be actually a available GM that has been proven as a multi-world championship general manager. You could argue and say that Rob Pelinka is a championship general manager too, and I get that, and I can understand it because he helped orchestrate that, but 2.5 seasons of mismanagement, I think you need to start looking in a possible other direction. But again, we'll wait and see how the finished product for this season turns out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's at least more room for optimism than there was before the deadline. That's for sure.
And that I agree. Absolutely, I agree. Once again, it is Stone Hansen. You got to go ahead and check him out along with the other guys at the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. Join Bryce Hendricks, Cooper Klein, and of course Stone Hansen each and every time out. They go ahead and talk about the NBA draft, all the stuff that's going on. Yes, we all know Victor Wembanyama is going number one. We all know Scoot Henderson is going number two. But what about the rest of the draft? Absolutely anyone's fair game. So that's what we'll go ahead and talk about here. But also, you can go ahead and check it out in more detail at the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. And before we go ahead and talk about the NBA draft, want to hear some more thoughts on with the Lakers. I mean, with the Lakers, when it comes down to it, my friend, they still haven't, finally with this better fitting squad, they still haven't come to terms on any lineup yet. I know Dennis Schroeder in recent days, even though he did have a couple good performances before it went awry in Portland, has been talked about being sent to the bench by the fans, but yet he stays in there for Darvin Ham. And we'll get to Darvin Ham in a minute. But your thoughts, though, on what a starting rotation should be right now for the Los Angeles Lakers?
Yeah, I think that. So, if it were up to me personally, I would have Schroeder coming off the bench to run the offense as your backup point guard. I think I'm higher on Schroeder than a lot of people, but I don't think that he and Russell are the ideal pairing in the backcourt. Um, so, what it comes down to for me is Austin Reeves or Malik Beasley, and that question is dependent on who the power forward is, or the other forward alongside LeBron, with Hachimura or Vanderbilt. Um, Personally, I think I would start Vanderbilt because I do think that he is just a all defensive caliber type defender, and I think that pairing him next to Anthony Davis in your starting and closing lineups is probably what's most beneficial if you're looking at the remaining three players in that starting lineup, to give you some sort of backbone where it's not all on Anthony Davis to make up for the sins of his teammates. That said, I think if you're having Vanderbilt, it poses a little bit of spacing problems. So for my shooting guard, I would probably go with the best spacing option possible, which for me would be Malik Beasley. So in an ideal world, I think it would look like Russell, Beasley, LeBron, Vanderbilt, and Anthony Davis.
And that's something a lot of people have talked about between Beasley and Austin Reeves, with Austin Reeves getting a lot of love out there. But with Austin Reeves, he went undrafted for a reason. And, there are times where you really see things really clicking, and he looks like a player out there as far as someone that could be a rotation on anyone's team. And then there are games where he looks completely lost, and they have him out there against some of the best players in the NBA, and he looks like an undrafted player. Your thoughts on Reeves? I'm glad they were able to get any kind of return on him. As far as undrafted players are concerned, you don't know what you're going to get, and the fact that he's played so much on this Lakers team over the past 2 seasons has been outstanding. I would love to see him find some consistency at some point, and if he can, he's going to be a keeper in this league. But his inconsistency right now, especially his outside shot, I think is what is holding him back.
Yeah, and I think that that is probably why I would have him on the bench as opposed to Beasley. I would start Reeves if Ham was insistent on starting Hachimura, which it seems like he is. But I think Reeves is a good enough defender in a lot of different circumstances to justify the playing time, especially when you look at who else is going to be in the backcourt with him a lot of the time. Schroeder has been a decent defender at times. He's also been someone that's inconsistent defensively. But I think that he has that sort of point of attack, and that's what Austin Reeves offers from the guard position. I think if you're the Lakers, you really need that sort of point of attack defense when you're looking around at who's on the perimeter. And I think that it makes a lot of sense to give him an ample amount of playing time. I'm just not sure that I would necessarily start him with who else would be on the roster for spacing reasons. But long term, I do think Reeves can be a pretty valuable rotation player. I don't know if he's ever like a, you know, 30 team, like legitimate starter for everybody, but I think that there's enough there. I think he provides enough in enough areas to make him worth a rotation spot for a lot of teams. It's just a matter of, like you said, consistency, and I think he'll figure that out as we go through uh, game after game, and hopefully into next season as well.
One of the things, though, that the fans in our chat room and the audience out there and fans at large have been talking about all season long is the rotations for Darvin Ham and his coaching acumen so far this year. He's earned a lot of praise for what he did with Russell Westbrook, convincing him to come off the bench, which is something that should have happened a long time before. And he's been praised as far as the energy that this team has had consistently, despite its losing ways. But his decision making at times, the fact that the team is one of the poorest, if not the poorest team in the third quarter, the fact his rotations have been very suspect, his reluctancy to make changes, even though he's had more starting lineup changes in the NBA, people seem to want more. Like, for instance, his reliance on Dennis Schroeder in the starting lineup has been a big point of contention for a lot of people. Plus, his rotations down the stretch as they get close to the fourth quarter have obviously been in question at several points in time. Your thoughts on overall on Darvin Ham, where he is as a coach, and if you think he should remain the coach for the long term?
I was skeptical of Ham. I didn't really know much about him when he first became the Lakers head coach. What I did know is he was an assistant coach for a long amount of time. And that's sort of a red flag in and of itself. There's a reason he was an assistant for a long time and couldn't nail down a head coaching job for that amount of time. And I think we're starting to see the fruits of that. I'm not the biggest Ham fan. I think that there's a lot of questionable decision making that goes on in terms of rotations, but not only that, also in terms of adjustment within game. We saw at the last Blazers game, obviously, it looked like they were just bombing threes a lot. A lot of times they were wide open. I think that that was by design coming into the game, but I don't think Ham was able to figure out within the game how to adjust their game plan. And I think that that is, obviously what led to that blowout. And I think that we've seen that a lot throughout this season. I think he just struggles to adjust the game plan within games, and that's a big, that's a huge red flag. I would personally look for other. I wasn't a big fan of firing Vogel to begin with, but I would look at other routes this off season. I'm not sure. I don't think now's the time to fire him because obviously you're in the final stretch of games and you probably want to remain as much continuity within the team as you can for that final stretch. But this off season, I would definitely look at other options and not tie myself definitively to the ham wagon.
And the thing that bothers me the most when it concerns Darvin Ham, he says is his first coaching position. And with LeBron and AD, they're not on the same time frame as a rookie coach. And having a rookie head coach, I mean, okay, in Boston, we've seen actually a rookie head coach do very well because of the system and the platform that's in place. But with the Lakers, where the organization as a whole has not actually been streamlined. It's not actually been something that's consistent or consistently good. It's seemingly all over the place the past decade. I mean, we've hit the highs of highs and lows as an organization, and more often it's been lows as the number of playoff appearances in the past 10 years dictate. It's something where maybe if LeBron's time frame is and time window is short, maybe you want to get an experienced coach that can actually go ahead and get the best out of him and a team in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah, and I don't know who that would be at the moment when you look at sort of the coaching market out there. But I think that yeah, Ham uh, is obviously not experienced as a head coach, and it's showing throughout the season. Um, the other thing I think that's important to note is I do believe that the Lakers, when they fired Vogel, allowed Ham to sort of pick out his coaching staff when they hired him. With Missoula, I believe everything has stayed in place. He's the new head coach,
Yeah,
and coaching staffs I think play a bigger part of the coaching picture than a lot of people give credit for.
agreed.
Um, yeah, and letting a rookie head coach pick out his own staff is another questionable move by Pelinka in the front office. So I think that there's more than just Ham that needs to be reevaluated this season in terms of the coaching.
Once again, it is the Lakers fast break. Stone Hansen here is here. He is one of the guys behind the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. Go ahead and check it out today wherever you get your podcasts. These guys do a great job of breaking down the draft for you. And it's not just like 10 or 15-minute, quickies. These are like hour, 2 hour long conversations where they go heavy in depth on the NBA draft. And before we head on out, I am an NBA draft fan. I am nowhere near the expert you are. I have created and actually done extensive research in past drafts on the NBA draft and done my own mock drafts, et cetera, et cetera. This year, I've not had as much time, admittedly, to go ahead and check out a lot of the NBA draft prospects. I am aware. I've actually done a little bit of reading up and obviously listened to your podcast in recent days as well, because you said you were going to come out back on the show. And I always prep by listening to your good stuff beforehand. But before we head on out, my friend, I wanted to talk about the NBA draft. Of course, Victor's going number one. There's no doubt. I saw him live play against Scoot, and I feel like I was privileged. And the first thing that I will always remember is that the crowd in the Dollar Loan Center Arena was about half full, maybe at best. And to me, that's a tragedy and that's a shame, because there should have been more people around the country that should have actually gone and seen the game, because it was definitely worth it to see and actually be experiencing, and Rafael Barlow, my good friend and our good friend from, what he does with the Locked On NBA Draft podcast and all that. He was there and I got a chance to see him and whatnot. We talked about it. It was so funny because people in that first half were downing Victor. Oh man, is he really worth it, man? Is he really worth the number one pick? Because he was kind of struggling coming out of the gate. He started out hot, but he kind of struggled in the late first quarters, second quarter. Oh, is this guy worth it? Then he exploded in that second half. And Scoot Henderson, who was really hot in the first half, and people were like, oh, could Scoot be the number one? Scoot should be the number one. He wasn't as successful doing the things he needed to do in that second half as far as driving in the lane exploding, getting around Victor, but he found other ways to get people involved and he stayed involved. And that's what I think a great young player needs to learn is the ability, okay, if option 1 is not working for you, let's go to option 1A or 1B or 1C. So your thoughts on this before we get heavy into the draft, talk about the other players, like about the Thompson twins and anybody else that you want to talk about. I want to hear your thoughts though on Victor and Scoot and what a privilege it is to see two of the best draft prospects to come out in quite a long time.
Yeah, I wish I had made those exhibition games. I had other obligations to
I
tend to
still
at that
got the
time.
tickets, man. I think if they both pop as players,
Yeah,
yeah,
I know. I would love to watch Victor live eventually. Um, yeah,
it is a treat. I will tell you, it is an
oh
absolute
yeah,
treat.
I'm sure. I've been doing this a long time now, and I've never seen. I mean, Victor is a one of one prospect.
Yeah.
We've talked about we've labeled, I think wrongly so, um, prospects in the past as generational. I won't name names, but I do think that Wemby is this generational prospect. I don't think that we'll ever see another Victor in our lifetimes, and what he can do on the court. Um, people, I mean, people, I think, sort of get worried about the injury history and all that. I don't even care about any of that right now. Just focusing on what he actually does on the court is absolutely incredible. When you're 7'5" or 7'6", and you're able to dribble like he can and have reactive passes like he can, and see the court and process things as quickly as that. It's rare for bigs to do that. It's even rarer for 7'5" bigs to do that.
Mhm.
Then you're extremely special. And most big men that are labeled as sort of these unicorns coming out end up not being much of shooters in the NBA. It just doesn't work out a lot of times. With Victor, he's not only probably like a top three rim protector that I've ever seen. He's also I very much buy him as this shooter, as a big man, and that's huge in today's game. So um, there's really so much that he does. We did, I think, an hour and a half podcast a couple weeks ago on him. If you want to really listen and nerd out on everything that Victor does on the court, but he is, I think, 1A and 1B with Luka Doncic in terms of the prospects that I've watched throughout the years.
Just a tremendous prospect, like you said. For me, I have rarely seen an individual coming out of well, whatever amateur, whether it's Europe, whether it's high school, whether it's college, and seeing a guy that's on the verge of becoming a pro, just as skilled as an individual that he is. I mean, my gosh, I've called him, and I will still continue to call him a 7'4". I think Raphael said 7'4" and a half, 7'4" and a half wing. Because to me, he doesn't play like a center. It's to
Oh
me
yeah.
if maybe even better, even more fluid than than Ralph Sampson was when he was before the knees and the injuries took a toll on him. Ralph Sampson could move around very well for the big man. This is not even close. I mean, to me, I actually picture and I view Victor Wembanyama as someone as 6'7", 6'8". I don't always see him as 7'4" and a half. I always see him when he plays on the offensive side and the way he handles the ball, way he sees the vision, the passing, the shot. Obviously, as far as he's very streaky still from the behind the arc, but when he's on, he's really really good. To me, I see him more as a 6'7", 6'8" player as opposed to a 7'4" player at times. Maybe that's to a detriment at the times because he does play a little bit soft. But my gosh, to have those kind of resources, to have that kind of skill, to be able to switch out on the defensive end and pop out on the perimeter like he can, and to be able to move laterally is just absolutely incredible for someone like that. I will never probably in my life see anyone that kind of size that can move that well.
Yeah, I don't think anybody ever will. It's It is pretty remarkable. He's, like I said, a one of one talent. I don't think there's anyone that can replicate that. I think he embodies what the modern NBA has become to the absolute peak. I think that when you think of modern NBA, at near the top of the conversation is what a modern big has become, because that has changed the complexity of a
Mhm.
lot of NBA teams. And I don't think anybody embodies that better than Victor Wembanyama, especially considering the fact that he's 4 or 5 inches taller, 6 inches taller in a lot of cases than other bigs in the league. So when he's doing what he does at his size, uh, and he has the footwork, the touch, um, even the rim protection like we were talking about. I won't even get into like how nuanced it would be because it would take me hours like the other podcast we did, but it would take too long. But just in totality, what he brings on the court is unparalleled, and I think um, anyone who doesn't have him number one in this class would be wrong, even if he doesn't live up to the expectations put upon him, because there's never been a pre-draft prospect like Victor.
I agree. I agree with you on that. I mean, Shaq, you could for so many different reasons because he was also at an early age so fluid and so agile for someone his size, but he didn't have the touch anywhere near the touch that Victor did, nor did he need to in his game at that point in time. So it's kind of a different context because it was a different basketball game then. And then you're talking about Anthony Davis. I clearly see him as a better prospect at this time than Anthony Davis was at that time. And I know he's like maybe and even Zion too. At their perspective, coming out of high school, 17, going on 18 years of age, I clearly see him as better and more developed and ready to play now more than Zion or Anthony Davis. I know those two are probably considered in the past decade plus probably the best prospects heading into the draft.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't really have much more to add to that. I think you summed it up well.
But then there's also another great player that probably under
Yes.
most circumstances would be the number one without a doubt, and that would be Scoot Henderson, who I would, if it was last year's draft, if he would have qualified for last year's draft, I would have made him my number one choice. He's just so tremendous as a ball handler. His vision is so underrated because he's such a great scorer, and if he ever develops a consistent 3-point shot, because he already shoots well from the line, he is really going to be something special. And his defense, he doesn't take plays off. His intensity and his competitiveness, he reminds me of Russell Westbrook with a jump shot. I think that's probably the best thing. Maybe Russell rebounds a little bit better, but with Scoot, I mean, he's got really, really good from the mid range, excellent from the mid range. I saw him shooting, and his stroke from the mid range is outstanding. So, your thoughts on Scoot Henderson? I really think any team who finishes the runner up will definitely be pleased that they got Scoot Henderson.
Yeah, I think that like you're saying, if it was a vast majority of other classes, Scoot would be at the top of the conversation. But the fact that we have Victor obviously makes that a foregone conclusion that he's not number one. But that's no fault to him. I do think that he is an excellent guard prospect. I think that he is a fantastic passer. Someone that he's a walking paint touch, and he leverages that to the best of his abilities. I think that he is really just an awesome guard prospect all around. Like the mid range, like you're saying, hasn't spaced out to three yet, but I do have faith that he can get to an average rate at least in order to space out the court once he gets to the NBA eventually. So there's a lot to like with Scoot. I do think that he is definitively for me the number two prospect. Um, but I think that I don't think the gap between two and three is as big as a lot of people may think it is.
Mhm.
Um, But I do think that Scoot is a really, really awesome prospect, and whoever gets him, I think, is going to be very happy, even though they didn't get Wemby.
Once again, it is Stone Hansen. He is one of the guys behind the Upside Swings NBA Draft podcast. Please go ahead and check it out each and every time they go ahead and air a new episode. It's right there for you. Got 150 episodes in the tank. So go ahead and check out the entire library of great shows that they've got waiting for you right now at the Upside Swings NBA Draft podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. But this has been called a very deep draft as far as rotational players, as far as players who can shoot, players who can score, players with athleticism. I know a lot of the athleticism starts with the Thompson twins, Amen and Ausar. I seen a little bit of footage, more than my share. I'd say probably a little bit more than most. I know a lot of people will be catching up on with the Thompson twins. I know with the overtime elite, sometimes it's always not the easiest to get, but once you find it, you're really impressed with what they got. Athletically, there's no doubting either of them as far as athletically. They've got serious flaws in their game, and that centers around the shooting aspect. But the way those two kids have really good vision, whether you want to put them at a point guard or a small forward slot because they're 6'7", 6'8", good wingspans. I know that they're considered in the lottery. In fact, as high. I've seen them as high as Amen for number 3, and Asar, I think around number 5 is the highest I've seen him, and I've seen him as low as 15. Your thoughts on the Thompson twins before we get to some other great players upcoming in the NBA draft?
Yeah, actually, right before I started recording with you, we just wrapped up on Upside Swings with our OTE episode.
Mhm.
That should drop sometime this week. Uh, yeah, Amen is for me the number 3 guy in this class. I
Mhm.
really like Amen. I think that the athleticism is that the way he moves is not like things we've seen in the past. Obviously, we've had super mega athletes, um, whether it be like Zach Levine or players of that ilk, crazy leapers, Shaden Sharp in this last draft. But um, I think Amen Thompson is just a different level of quick twitchiness that we don't really see on both ends
Compare him
as a
to someone like
prospect.
Blake Griffin, who had, and a keyword is had that at one time coming out of Oklahoma.
Um, Blake was before I did the draft, so as a prospect, I didn't really know. I did see him early years in the Clippers, and I would say that Amen Thompson is uh, maybe not the leaper Blake was, but I think he's not that far off
Yeah.
as a guard slash wing. And I think that aside from just the leaping, the quick twitchiness of the first step, how he
Mhm.
moves laterally, those are things we don't usually see to that level, especially in a combination with the leaping. There's his athleticism affects really every aspect that you can imagine, and that's not really something we see with athletes. It's not a whole package deal like it is with Amen, and that's why I'm so high on him. His brother, on the other hand, I think is a very different prospect. I know they get lumped in together quite often, and they share. They're obviously twins, so that's bound to happen to some extent. But I think Ausar, for me, I'll probably end up a lot lower than most people. I would have him near the end of the first round rather than the top near his brother. I don't think that he is quite the same level as an athlete, and I think he's a much slower processor of the game when the ball is in his hands. So I would favor Amen quite a bit, and I do think Amen is worthy of that number 3 praise, but I'll probably end up lower on Asar than most people.
Now, with both of them, the key is, obvious to both of their games, especially with a man with his athleticism, is how well can he shoot? And that's something obviously that's been a great question with the scouts out there, and from what I've seen as well, it's not a pretty shot yet. I'll say that.
Yeah, and to be 100% frank with you, I don't think it's going to ever be really a pretty shot. I don't foresee him ever being that much of a shooter, but I think he's such an athlete and can get to the paint at will that I'm not sure it's obviously, much better to have a three-point shot, but I don't think it's going to um be detrimental to him as a prospect. I don't think it makes or breaks him necessarily in the league. I think that it obviously would be better if he would able to shoot it further out. But I do think that He's so athletic and has such a quick first step, and is a very, very good passer in his own right. I would probably say not quite to Scoot levels, but not super far off. And I think that really makes for something special as a prospect.
Someone who has risen up draft boards because of not only his play, but also, I believe, partly because the team success as well as Brandon Miller of Alabama, because Alabama reaching the number one spot for the first time in a long time as far as on the men's basketball side, because we know how well they dominate on the football side. But to see them at the level that they're at, and also as an NCAA tournament favorite, a lot of that is due to his play. He has risen up draft boards to be a major contender for that number three slot. Your thoughts on Brandon Miller?
Yeah, my thoughts are not as extensive as the other guys we talked about because I'm actually this year trying to spend really an extensive amount of time on each prospect before I move on to the next. And I
Mhm.
really want to dive deep on every guy so that I have, by the end of the year, I'll put out a full board and hopefully it'll be, as accurate as it can get. Obviously, it won't be 100% because
Mhm.
it never is. But I do think Brandon Miller is a pretty special shooter, especially at his size. The movement shooting is really excellent. That's the biggest thing. People will label him as as an excellent shooter, which is correct. But the biggest factor of that is that he can shoot while moving at his size, with his body turning, coming off pin downs, things like that. That's not something you often see for guys that size, and that is super intriguing. Um, in terms of the rest of his game, I feel like I need to get a deeper understanding before I could really speak in depth about it because I just haven't watched enough games yet to really have that sense of what he is in totality. So I don't feel comfortable commenting much further outside of the shooting.
I understand. I understand. And we'll get to your choices here as far as who you think is rising up draft boards, or who you think, fans out there, like the Lakers fans out there, should be looking at as far as the first round is concerned. But before we do, I want to know one thing about this deep draft. A lot of wings, a lot of guards. Point guards is kind of light on, once you get past Scoot, but or if you want to consider the Thompson twins as far as one of them or both of them as far as in a point guard facilitator mode, it gets kind of thin there. But one of the other thin spots is after Victor, centers. The center position is kind of weak, in my opinion. Filipowski, from Duke, he reminds me a lot of a Plumlee. I will say
Hmm.
that in many ways, for better or for worse. Actually, although Plumlee is actually, there's a Plumlee that's actually playing very well right now. He just got traded to the Clippers. You're talking about Lively, who's disappointed. You're talking about Khalil Ware at Oregon, who's also disappointed. I definitely want to hear, our Michael Weisenberg, Mikey V, want to hear his thoughts, being that he is in and around the Oregon university all the time as far as watching that. And I'm sure he has some great thoughts on that. But last draft, I thought was pretty deep with big guys. I thought with big guys that can succeed in the league. I want to pat myself on the back because I thought Walker Kessler was a player from the get go. I had stated that, I think, with you last year, and I usually don't get many right, but I knew I got that one right. I got him and Desmond Bain right, and also Emmanuel quickly to an extent. But I think those are three guys in the past 5 seasons. I'm like, those guys are going to be players, and I was right on that. But your thoughts on the center position, the big man position? I think if a team is in need of a big man, I don't think they're going to get much help in the NBA draft this season.
Yeah, unless you're hitting number one, which only one team is, 29 other teams are going to be probably not super happy with the remaining field of bigs. I came into this class massively high on Khalil Ware. I am actually still really high on him, but I don't think his stock will be high enough for him to remain in the draft come draft time. And
Mhm.
that's sort of the thing that we're starting to monitor with a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys that were projected to be one and dones that just have not sort of lived up to the expectations quite yet. And I think that there could be, um, as deep as a class as we had thought and hoped it would be, it could end up being actually pretty shallow past the first few big names because a lot of these guys I don't think have the stock that they were hoping for coming into the season. So it could get pretty interesting once we get to the deadline. when they can withdraw their names. That said, I think probably the best big. It depends how you view him. Jerace Walker could be in the mix. I know a lot of people view him as sort of as a small ball five. I really like him, and that's how I would use him as sort of a small ball five. So he's probably the best name after that, and he's someone that'll probably go in the 5 to 10 range. Super versatile defender who I think can switch onto a lot of different guys, and is super active. His motor runs very hot. Uh, the other remaining guys, it's a lot of guys that'll probably end up being like late first round or somewhere in the second after that. There's really between after Gerace, if you even consider him a big, he'll be a small ball big. There's probably going to be a good 20 or plus picks that go without any big men being taken. Um, After that, some names that I do like. I really like KJ Adams out of Kansas. If he were to stay in, I think that he's a really tight rotational defender, undersized, but I think has a very good understanding of where to be on the court defensively. Fa Abagidi from the G League Ignite, which I'm sure you've seen. He I think, has a lot more stock should be put into him as sort of a big man option when you get past the big initial big names, because I do think that he's a very good rim runner and someone that has projectable indicators in terms of maybe being able to space the floor a little bit more than a traditional big. Um, and then after that, it's pretty bleak. I know a lot of people like Filipowski. So far, I'm not very in on him. I have a lot of defensive concerns with him. Um, Noah Clowney is probably in the mix as well as someone that is also on Alabama that playing alongside Brandon Miller, who I think surprised a lot of people this season as somebody that is able to space the floor, but also has sort of a switchability as a big, which is obviously a super valuable skill set if it were to click. So those are probably the big names after the initial headliner names in the draft that I'll be watching.
Zach Edey from Purdue gets a lot of pub because he's on one of the best teams in college basketball, but at his size, he doesn't move as fluidly. So I see there's always going to be an issue with him in the league. I know Magic Man Sean Grice of our show keeps calling him a Purdue's version of Ivica Zubats. I'm not exactly convinced that that's the case. I think Ivica Zubats came in with a lot more gifts and a lot. He's also a little bit more fluid and can actually move a little bit faster than Zach Edey can. Your thoughts on Zach Edey? And then I have a name that I want to throw at you here at the end of the show, but also your thoughts as well on some upcoming draft choices that you really like. But we'll go ahead and talk Zach Edey first.
Yeah, I'm Edie's obviously been in the radars for draft people for quite some time. Playing at Purdue, I think that I'm pretty out on him. I was also very out on Walker Kessler, so take what I say with Edie with a grain of salt, because apparently I'm not the big man whisperer that you are. With Walker, I missed on him very badly, but I do think that Edie he has skill for his size, but I just don't think it's enough to really stick in the NBA.
Mhm.
I think guys that are that big are always going to struggle defensively.
Yeah.
Boban is probably one of the best um, skilled offensive players for his size, and he still can't really get minutes on the court because of how much of a liability he is defensively. And I don't really think it changes much with Edie.
Yeah.
He's just not mobile enough. I don't think he's as good a rim protector as his size that he should be. And I think that there's a lot of questions in terms of if he's going to go help side and someone does a quick pass and he has to go change directions to block that, it's an easy bucket for the other team. There's just a lot of things like that that I think have to be contextualized as a shot blocker that Edie doesn't check the boxes for. So I'm pretty out on him, but I have been wrong in the past, like I've said, so maybe I'm wrong here
I'm kind of
too.
leaning your way on Edie. I just, again, he fits well on the Purdue side, but that's a college side. And I think that's where you get to the jump in the pros because it's quicker, faster. Reactions have to be better, quicker, and faster. And in order to do so, you got to have that mobility. And I just don't think he has it at this point in time. Can he get it? I'm not sure. I saw that with Kessler. I thought that Kessler could stick just because of the fact I thought he was mobile enough to be able to utilize his strengths. I just don't see that with Edie yet. Maybe if he drops some weight, maybe that could be just the issue right there. Maybe get him on a conditioning program if you get him as an undrafted kid or as someone as a late second rounder, you can develop him into that. I mean, we thought the same about Luka Garza as far as not being able to play in the NBA because of the defensive issues. And look at him; he's playing very well for Minnesota. I was out on him, so I missed it on him. But yeah, I think that with the big guys, it's really tough to tell, exactly how much of a contribution that they can make in this league. It's a really tough call because that size, you're not sure exactly if they will be exploited or if they will be doing the exploiting in the NBA.
Yeah. There's offensive skill for sure, but I think for me right now, the defensive skill outweighs that in a negative way. So I'm not as optimistic with him as a prospect.
So there are though prospects that you like, and I love getting Raphael, and I love getting Mikey V on the shows because you guys have like a core set of players which all of you guys are high on. And then it branches out like a tree from there where maybe you will like someone that Mikey V doesn't, maybe Mikey V likes someone that Raphael doesn't, and so on and so forth, that are maybe not as high on, or maybe that you are. It goes back and forth. Who are the players that you're high on that people need to take notice of in this year's NBA draft?
Yeah, so I think a couple names that stand out to me. One of them would be Brandon Podziemski, who's getting virtually like zero buzz outside of some Twitter circles. There's not a whole lot, and I can't figure out why it is. National buzz around him. He is the sort of pseudo replacement for Jalen Williams at the Santa Clara Broncos this season. Obviously, Jalen has gone on to have a fantastic rookie season. And Brandon Podziemski has done a pretty admirable job of filling in for him at the Broncos, who had a successful season this year as well as last year with Jalen leading the team. Um, Podziemski is a sort of combo guard that thrives either on or off ball. That's sort of the appeal with him. I think somebody that you can put at either guard position. I think he's a really, really good shooter who also has the chops to create for himself on ball as well as others who can handle pick and roll very competently. Is more than capable of setting his teammates up once he gets into the paint and kicking out. There's just a lot of things he does well offensively that I think he's flying under a lot of radars. And uh, even though he's not getting that national buzz, I would still have him as definitely like a top 20 prospect in this class, maybe even higher by the time I fill everything out. Um, Another guy that's somewhat in a similar vein, a little bit different though, is Terquavion Smith out of North Carolina State. He was obviously had a lot of buzz near the end of last draft class, where he had a couple big showings um, combine games, and he did play pretty well in those, but ended up pulling his name out of the draft and returned. I think he is a phenomenal shooter. You don't see a lot of guys taking pull up threes from 8 feet from beyond the line. There's a lot of times where he's shooting off movement. He's developed his passing game more than last season. I think he's gotten better since last year, and I know some would disagree, but because I do think that, I think that improvement is a big deal for me, and seeing that improvement in my eyes is enough to put him up higher than where he was last year. I'll probably end up with him as a lottery pick. Some people are probably a little bit lower on that, but I do think he is a really someone I really believe in. Uh,
He could be someone that the Lakers might be eligible to pick when they pick, probably late teens is what I'm
yeah,
looking at right now.
He's he is, obviously Podziemski would be someone I'd look at too, but I don't
Mhm.
think you'd have to spend a first round pick on him to get him at this point in the class. Terquavion though is definitely someone I've mentioned in other circles, and I think what the Lakers should target if they keep their pick or swap with the Pelicans or whatever the case ends up being. Another name, I guess probably the last name I'll bring up here. He's someone that is probably going to be looked at as a second round guy. If I were the Lakers, I would not hesitate to look at him with whatever pick we end up with, somewhere probably in the 15 to 24 range or something. Um, is Kevin McCullough from Kansas. He was in last class, ended up pulling his name out. Obviously, a little bit older of a player. Um, for my money, is probably the best wing or non big defender in this class. Um, Outside of maybe Amen. I think that he is a fantastic perimeter defender, a team defender who knows exactly when to rotate, and has enough offensive skill to keep him on the court where he's not ending up as a Matisse Thybulle and not being like a active negative for you on that end. So McCullough is someone I'm much higher on than a lot of people, but I think that when you watch him, to me, he strikes you as an NBA guy. Like this is a guy who I think belongs in an NBA rotation. And if you can get that at pick 20, I think you've done a good job because there's usually not 20 plus guys in any given class that end up as rotation guys.
You know what? I can get it wrong too. You remember I was really high on Isaiah Mobley, and he hasn't seen any real playing time for the Cleveland Cavaliers yet. So yes, I can get him wrong too every once in a while. But maybe Mobley will play. Who knows? Down the stretch, we'll see. But before we head on out, my friend, and before you tell everybody why they need to check out the Upside Swings NBA Draft podcast, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Twitter's cult favorite from the powerhouse known as North Dakota State. That is Grant Nelson. So, Grant, tell me a little bit about Grant Nelson. 6'11". I've seen him play a little bit. It's got some moxie, got a little bit of pizzazz going. I know that actually this arm on this is bigger than his arm, so that's obviously something I would work on. But 6'11" kid has got some moves, got some as far as some handle. It still needs to be consistent from the outside. Your thoughts? Is Grant Nelson someone that someone should take a flyer on in the second round, or can be an NBA player?
You know what? I've seen very limited amounts of Grant Nelson at this point. I do know I have many friends that are very high on Grant Nelson and many that would not touch him with a 10-foot pole. He seems somewhat polarizing. Um, as for my own thoughts, from the limited footage that I've seen, he seems like somebody that is getting a lot of hype because he doesn't fit your typical NBA look. I would say
Yes.
he's not. Don't judge a book by the cover. He's sort of the pinnacle of that.
Mhm.
He has obviously some athleticism that he likes to use around the rim. He is someone that I think at, at a certain point, if you're like past 45 to 50 in a lot of classes. I'm kind of just like, if you like a player, take them. I think that it gets to a point where there's not really much of a separation past 45 or 50 for the next 40 or 50 prospects. And if you like someone that much, take them there, draft them,
Yeah.
and don't look back. And I think if you think that with Grant Nelson, go for it. I haven't seen enough of him to really say I'd put him anywhere above that. That may change as I watch more, but that's sort of where I'm at right now.
Once again, it's Stone Hansen. He is part of a great trio of draft experts that you can go ahead and catch all their episodes today at the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. Before we head on out, my friend, I have talked so many great things about it. I have listened to more than my share of episodes. I've also been on one episode. So I ask you, my friend, at this point in time, so I ask you your thoughts on the Upside Swings NBA Draft podcast and what it can do for people out there that really want to get to better understand everything going on with this year's NBA draft.
Yeah, yeah. Upside swings. This is our third year now, and it's been great. It's been a great ride. The sort of the goal coming into it, and I think what we've maintained throughout pretty much this whole process is that there's a lot of podcasts out there about the draft if you wanted to. Raphael does a great job on his podcast. There's multiple others beyond his that also do a good job of giving you analysis. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are limited, but sometimes by the amount of time that they have to talk about a prospect because most people are, I'm going to be frank, not going to listen to a hour and a half, 2 hour podcast on prospects. But if you are
I do.
somebody, you do, and I do appreciate that. Um, and if you are someone that is interested in gaining a very deep and nuanced understanding of the draft, and sort of knowing more about players than you're able to find in a lot of places, I would say check out Upside Swings. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for everybody. But if you are somebody that is interested in really understanding the draft and really understanding these prospects beyond what you're able to find in a lot of other places, then I would suggest giving us a listen. Drop us a follow on Twitter at Upside Swings. Um, and as the draft comes near, we have a lot of exciting stuff planned. We'll be obviously we have about 60 or so names right now of prospects we'll be breaking down in depth. So if you're a fan of your school, like if you're a huge Indiana fan, for example, or something, you want to hear about Trace Jackson Davis in the future, we'll definitely have a podcast that has him involved, and you can listen to our in-depth thoughts about him and where we think he would end up being in a class or where we would have him. So if you're a fan of a particular school or player, we'll definitely be covering them throughout this cycle, as well as international guys. Very much deep dives into names you've probably never heard of. And odds are stacked against them, but we'll cover them anyways. And yeah, we'll also eventually after that we do it every year called a 30 teams in 30 days. That's where we had Gerald on. And we talk about each NBA team and sort of where they're at and certain prospects or names that would uh, really benefit them in terms of where they are in the draft and how they could acquire them. So we have a lot of stuff planned before the draft coming up, starting to get into our busy time now. But if you want to really dive into the draft, I would definitely suggest giving us a listen.
That's the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. I like it also. Yes, they do cover Victor. They do cover Scoot, but for a Lakers fan and for fans of a lot of NBA teams out there that are in the teens, where their draft picks are going to lie, the teens, the 20s, you don't get always the coverage that you need as far as the players that might be in that area or find out more about them ahead of time. So I love the Upside Swings NBA Draft podcast because it helps me become more knowledgeable about the players in the teens and in the 20s that you don't necessarily know as well, which you need to because, if, for instance, the Lakers, like I said, as we've mentioned all throughout this podcast, because of the swap with the New Orleans Pelicans, part of the Anthony Davis trade and all that, they will most likely get a pick between 15 and 25. Unless there's a big swing by New Orleans one way or the other, it'll probably fall somewhere with there. So you need to know the players that might be around that area or who right now the guys at Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast are projecting in that area. So I'd say for Lakers fans and for NBA fans, NBA draft heads as a whole, you need to check out that show just to get a better idea of who is trending where in this year's NBA draft.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving us a shout out and for having me on again. It's always a blast to talk about the Lakers. And yeah, looking forward to what the season has in store for us for the remainder of it.
Well, the red carpet, as I always say, is always open for you. You hit me up whenever you want, as you did
Appreciate
this
that.
time around. But you're always welcome to join us on the post games. Don't be scared of Joe. He doesn't bite. He doesn't bite. And he respects your opinion. He actually loves and encourages when other people come on the show, just like I do. We love hearing different voices on the show. So you're always welcome as a fellow Lakers fan on the post game as well. Anytime. You just got to give me a heads up, man. Anytime.
Appreciate that. I'll definitely take you up on that. I think as the season goes on, maybe after the All Star break.
Absolutely. Unless it goes off the rails.
Yeah, then you probably won't be seeing too much of me.
So the numbers tell me. It's always funny because you see when the Lakers win, yay! When the Lakers don't win, no, it goes in a
Yeah,
completely different direction. Yes, but I will
yeah.
say though, I'm very happy for everyone taking the time out of the day to watching and listening. to us here at the Lakers Fast Break. If you could do the same for Upside Swings, that is just truly, truly appreciated. Once again, it's Stone Hansen. Please go ahead and check out the great work that he does. Also, as well, Cooper Klein and Bryce Hendricks. Please go ahead and check out what those guys are doing today at the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. Well, my friend, it's going to be interesting. We got the second, I can't call it the second half. Okay, the post All-Star break for the Lakers coming up. Time is running out, my friend. 23 games left. Any last thoughts before we head on out?
Just that I hope we see as much LeBron James as possible, even before the All-Star break, because I think it's important for the team to sort of learn to gel, and get a couple games under their belt, heading into that post All-Star game stretch. So, yeah, hopefully we see that. And I never want bad things to happen to people, but hopefully the teams ahead of us start dropping behind us. Hopefully, we start seeing some of them drop a little bit, so we have more of a chance. We're only 2.5 games out of 10, and 4 games, I think, out of 8 or so. So it's very much in the cards, very much doable, and hopefully we make it happen.
Hopefully, we will indeed. Once again, it's Stone Hansen from the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. Please go ahead and check it out today, wherever you get your podcasts. My friend, always great to have you here talking Lakers basketball and the NBA draft. Two things I always love to talk about right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast.